Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It feels like absolutely ages since I have sat down and filmed a video, probably because it has been ages. But yeah, I am back, and I'm back with a video for Mental Health Awareness Week, which is this week, all being well if I get this up on time. And I have done mental health videos before, and I kind of was trying to think, like, what can I do about like this year? And so I had a little like research and stuff, and basically the theme of this year's Mental Health Awareness Week with a lot of the charities is stress, and how stress contributes to like mental health and mental illness problems. They tend to be focusing more on workplace stress, but I wanted to focus on stress, I suppose, more generally and more from like my point of view. And basically I wanted to talk to you today about how stress impacted on my mental health and how it kind of led to a lot of my mental health problems. I don't want to say that stress completely caused my problems, because I think with any mental illness it's not as simple as just having one cause. I think there's a lot of things that kind of go on that contribute towards someone struggling with their mental health, but stress was certainly a big part of it for me. So I just wanted to talk to you, I suppose, a little bit about my story and how my experiences with stress, and how they have kind of impacted on my mental health, and how I have tried to learn, like, over the years to deal with it a little bit better. So I hope you're going to find it helpful, and yeah, let's just get started. So the stress that I have mainly experienced is around my health and my physical health. My mental health problems started to become noticeable, I suppose, when I was about 15, and that was at the same time that my physical health problems started to get a lot worse. Up until then I had health problems, but they hadn't had like a huge impact on my life, I suppose. They had just been like kind of like odd things here and there that we had never really like put together. But yeah, when I sort of got to the age of 15, things started going downhill quite rapidly. So if you don't know, I have a genetic condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but I was only diagnosed with that at the age of 25. So at the age of 15 I had no diagnosis at all. So it all kind of started from the beginning, I suppose. I started to get very, very, very tired. I started to get a lot of pain. I was getting a lot of digestive problems, and all sorts of other things. I don't want to go into that too much now because it's not relevant to mental health, but I was getting a lot of physical symptoms, and I was feeling very unwell. I had to stop going to school because I just physically wasn't like well enough to do it. So I went to my GP a few times, and they kind of ran a few tests, and when they couldn't sort of find any kind of cause, I was referred to a paediatrician who wasn't the most supportive doctor I have ever met. She did a few tests and they didn't come back showing anything, and basically, I don't know, I felt that she had sort of washed her hands of me a bit. And so yeah, it kind of got to the point where things had been going on for quite a long time, and when you're physically not feeling very well and you're not getting any answers and no one seems to be like believing you, that like makes a lot of stress. So we got to the point, and my dad basically said to her, "Look, do you know what is wrong with my daughter?" He said, "We've been doing some research, and I wondered if it might be something called ME." And she said something like, "Well, we'll call it that if you want to." And that was kind of it, which is obviously not very satisfactory at all. And her attitude towards ME at the time was very, very negative. And she basically we got that diagnosis, and she referred me to a psychiatrist, which, I knew that I was feeling physically unwell, and so to be referred to a psychiatrist was confusing. I was only 15, I wasn't that old, and I didn't really understand. I thought, why is she referring me to a psychiatrist? Like, there's something physically wrong with me. I need like a physical doctor. But no, I got referred to a psychiatrist, and it just carried on from there, really, of not having doctors really believe that there was anything physically wrong with me. And, you know, my symptoms were sort of gradually getting worse, and I just wasn't feeling well, and there was no like treatment or help or support, anything like that. And that built up a lot of stress. Like, obviously, when, you know, when you're ill, you want to understand what's wrong with you and you want a treatment, but that wasn't there. So, I mean, I was under the psychiatrist, and so it was really my mental health that they were focusing on anyway, before there was even really a problem with it. But I think the whole situation just ended up making a problem with it. I mean, I can't say, like, if I had been physically okay, I can't say whether I would have got ill with mental health problems or not. But for me, I know a big trigger has always been my physical health. So yeah, that kind of, I suppose, that first experience of not getting help for my physical health made me really like stressed out, and, you know, I kept feeling like I needed to try and prove myself to my doctors, and I was also getting stressed because I was missing school, and at 15, you know, you're doing your GCSEs, so it was a really important time. I was missing all my friends, and life had gone from being pretty normal to being like so different, like having to go to hospitals a lot and have tests a lot, which is stressful in itself. And yeah, my mental health just went downhill. So that carried on for quite a few years, and I was kind of like in and out of school. I had home tutoring, managed to get some GCSEs, and then I applied for sixth form. I think I applied to do like 3 different sciences and something else, can't even remember. And I managed like the first couple of weeks, but my mental health was really, really suffering. I was self-harming. I had tried to take my life a few times. So behind the scenes, my mental health team were trying to sort out for me to be admitted to an adolescent psychiatric unit. So I think I managed about 2 weeks of sixth form, just feeling completely overwhelmed. I was still physically not well, and yeah, 2 weeks later I was admitted to this adolescent unit. And I think it was the best thing and the worst thing. It was actually quite a nice environment, which sounds weird for a psychiatric hospital, but like children's hospitals and adult hospitals are very, very different. So it almost felt a bit like a boarding school, and I made a lot of friends there. The staff were generally very supportive, mainly of my mental health problems. Physically, I didn't get much support, really. I was kind of left to my own devices and just sort of plodded through, I suppose. And I spent about 8 months there and came out in a better place, I think, than I had been when I went in. And after that, I obviously went back to like community mental health, and things kind of, I suppose, were quite like stable for a while. And that was up to about 2012, when I was 24, 25, I think. And yeah, things had been stable for a fair few years. I'd still been getting like health problems, but nothing sort of massive. And then we got to 2012 and just everything kicked off again. My physical health completely flared up, is all I can really say. I started having really, really bad digestive problems. I was struggling to eat. I was like losing weight again, not intentionally, just I was trying to eat what I could, and then things just weren't getting absorbed properly. Like in retrospect, I know why, but at that point I didn't really have a diagnosis apart from the ME, and it was beginning to make less and less sense because it just didn't like describe it didn't like encompass what I was experiencing. But so yeah, this sort of went on, and I was getting more and more unwell, had to go back to the doctors and had like referrals to a gastroenterologist. And to begin with, that was really good. They took me seriously. They organised lots of tests, some which were pretty horrible. And I suppose that in itself was stressful, but I kind of felt like things were getting done and people were taking me seriously. And then we got to the sort of summer of 2012, and they'd kind of done all the like standard tests that they would do. Nothing was coming back with any answers. So it got to the point where, yeah, I think I felt they were sort of giving up on me. I went to an appointment with my consultant. We'd been trying to get one for ages. We'd been trying to like phone his secretary, and just nothing was working. And my parents were quite concerned about me because I was really quite underweight and quite unwell. Went in to see my consultant. She took one look at me and said, "You're coming into hospital. I'm going to put a tube in your nose and going down into your stomach, and we're going to try and get some nutrition into you that way." And at that point, I think I was scared, but I was relieved, because I had got so poorly that I just thought, I'm not going to be able to carry on much longer without any sort of intervention. So I went in and it was fine. Put the tube in, which wasn't particularly nice, but I got used to it quite quickly. So I started having the tube feeding. The whole hospital admission was quite stressful from the beginning, because my consultant had admitted me and had said to me, "I don't want you to eat anything while you're being tube fed. I just want you to have the tube feed." But that hadn't been communicated to the team when I was admitted, and my consultant had gone on holiday. So I was telling them, I'm not meant to be eating, like having anything by mouth, and they had no record of it. So they automatically decided that I had an eating disorder and that I was trying to avoid food, which wasn't very helpful, because at that point, I was trying to do what my consultant wanted me to do. Eventually that got sorted, and for the first couple of weeks it was okay. I was tube fed. They did a few more slightly more abstract tests just to see if they could work out what was going on. Those came back with nothing to show. And then it got to the point where they felt that they had done all the tests that they could. There was nothing wrong. So basically it must be psychological. And at that point they said, "Right, we're going to take your tube out and send you home." And at that point I think the stress had built up so much, and I just lost it completely. And I just thought, right, they're taking the tube out, I've got no answers, nothing has actually got any better, and you're trying to send me home. I don't want to live like this anymore. And that stress just built up, and they wouldn't listen to me, they wouldn't listen to my parents, and I went downhill with my mental health incredibly quickly. So I had about a week of me refusing to eat anything and drinking very little. I don't remember in much detail that whole week, because when you don't eat for so long you get very unwell. And eventually they started putting drips into me without my consent, so they had to get some sort of agreement from some lawyer or something, I don't know. So yeah, I had just got to the point where the stress of being physically ill for so long and not having any answers and not having people believe me. The only people I felt that really believed me were my family and close friends. But my doctors, I felt, just weren't listening to me. They were blaming it on my psychological problems, which I did have, and I admitted to them, I do have I do have mental health problems, but there is also something physical going on. And they just, I don't know, I felt they'd given up and they just wanted to blame it on my mental health. So yeah, I spent that week not particularly conscious most of the time, and basically in the end, because of all the stress around my physical health, I ended up being sectioned because I got so unwell mentally. And the frustrating thing was that because I'd got so unwell mentally, there was no choice. Like, we had to put my mental health first and get me back to a bit of a better place. And I remember like going in, being taken to the psychiatric hospital in an ambulance. It was not a particularly nice experience. I'm more than happy to make a video about being sectioned if it's something that you would be interested in. But I remember, I think it was the following day, and my dad came to see me, and he said to me, he was like, look, Jenny, like, I still believe you have a physical health problem, but he said the only way you are going to get listened to and get help with that physical health problem is if you get on top of your mental health and get yourself to a better place. And that really kind of, I don't know, hit home or hit a nerve or something. And I think that was my kind of driving force almost, was to kind of try and get myself better mentally so that I could finally try and work out what was going on with me physically. There was a lot of stress along the way, because getting better from an eating disorder is incredibly stressful, and you know, living day to day with an eating disorder and with depression, and you know, I then got diagnosed with a personality disorder. Living with all of those is incredibly stressful, but there was also the added stress of my physical health and that not being taken seriously. And yeah, it was only after, I suppose, a couple of years after I had sort of worked really hard every day to like get my physical health better, that I finally found a doctor who worked out that I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and from that then worked out that my digestive problems were all being caused by gastroparesis and intestinal dysmotility, which is all related to the EDS. And I remember getting those diagnoses and just like, I don't know, I think I cried, because I was so happy that someone had finally taken me seriously. And it just felt like, you know, I don't know, I had conflicting feelings, because there had been so much stress leading up to it that had made me so ill mentally. And I just thought, why couldn't this have been found, you know, when things first started? Would I have gone through all that mental health problems if it had been found when I was 15? I try not to think about that too much, because I can't change how it's happened. But you know, all that stress did have a knock-on effect on my mental health, and you know, physical and mental health are so interlinked that it can sometimes be quite hard to pull them apart. But I always knew there was something physically wrong with me, and yeah, getting that diagnosis was a massive turning point. So up to now, I suppose, things are generally better. Since having the diagnosis, there is less stress than there was in that kind of, you know, fighting to get answers. It's not quite so much stress. There's stress in other areas, you know, living with a chronic illness that's not going to get better. But generally it's not the fighting for things isn't as bad. It's still there. I still have issues. I mean, I had an appointment with my gastro consultant last week because I've been having a lot of trouble with swallowing, which is quite a basic function, and you don't realise how important it is until you can't do it properly. And again, it's actually the same gastroenterologist, but I came out of the appointment with her just saying, I don't know why you're having problems swallowing, and not having any answers. So there's now the added stress of trying to fight for some answers for this and some help for this. And that has set my mental health problems off again. So I've been quite low and tearful and just generally struggling. And yeah, that is quite a normal thing, I think. You know, I think anyone that is struggling with their physical health is going to have some sort of effect on their mental health. Even if they say they're the happiest person in the world, you're going to get days when you feel down and you feel frustrated and you just want someone to listen to you and to sort it out, and that can't always be the case. So I want to try and move on now to like maybe how I deal with stress. I want to say before I go any further, I am not an expert in dealing with stress. Like honestly, talk to like anyone in my family and they will tell you that I probably don't deal with stress particularly well, and I let things get to me, and yeah, I do get very stressed out about all sorts of things. I'm terrible for worrying about things. But I do think over the years I've got like maybe a little bit better about coping with it. I think I've got to the point where I feel like I almost just accept it, that it's there, and I try and do this with a lot of emotions. And there is actually something called, I think it's called acceptance and commitment therapy or something like that. And that's the first kind of therapy that I have really like understood and have been able to kind of think, yeah, that makes sense to me, because instead of trying to challenge these like negative thoughts or trying to like challenge this stressful situation, you just, I suppose it's a bit like mindfulness. You accept that things are stressful and that things aren't, you know, going the way you want to, or that you feel overwhelmed or frustrated or, you know, whatever you're feeling. And you kind of just say to yourself, like, okay, I am feeling stressed out. I'm feeling overwhelmed by this situation. I'm not going to try and fight it. I'm just going to like almost like ride the wave, I suppose. And for me, that works better than trying to fight it, because I found when I was trying to fight it, I would get more frustrated because I couldn't fight it and I was just making myself more ill. So yeah, I think now I just try and like, I mean, the day I had my appointment with my consultant, I came out and I cried pretty much all evening, and I felt like it was the end of the world. And you know, some days I still do, because it's difficult to cope with the symptoms, and you know, I still have a long way to go into, you know, for finding some help and some answers. But I kind of just let myself cry and let myself feel upset about the situation. And then when I got up the next morning, I felt a little bit more like balanced, I suppose, and able to think, okay, yes, I feel crap about this situation. Yes, it's not a nice situation. I feel let down. I feel angry. But I need to work out what I can do to like move forwards. So I spoke to my parents, I spoke to some friends, and I kind of thought, okay, I've got an appointment with my GP next week. I'm going to go to her, I'm going to tell her what the appointment was like, how I feel about the appointment, how I feel let down and angry about it, and see if I can get some movement from her. And that kind of way of dealing with stress, I think, is what works best for me. The problem, I suppose, where it comes is not all stress, like you can't always find a solution or an answer. And in those cases, I think I just try and take it day by day, or minute by minute, or hour by hour, whatever kind of period of time works for you. And I just kind of accept that that's how I feel. You know, like if you're feeling happy, you don't try and challenge it or change it necessarily. You just kind of think, oh, I feel happy, that's great. So now I kind of think, oh, I feel really low. I feel like suicidal. I feel like I don't want to be here anymore. And I kind of just say to myself, right, okay, these are my like thoughts. This is how I'm feeling. This won't last forever. And I do try and tell myself that a lot, because I know, like, I suppose for me now, I've got a lot of experience from the past, and I can tell that yes, I had like this horrible like year in 2012 where everything went wrong, but it didn't last forever. And you know, I then got to 2013, 2014, and eventually things started to get a bit better. And I keep telling myself that, you know, things won't last forever the way they are. that's not to say that I don't struggle. Like, believe me, last week after my appointment, I was ready to like jack it all in. I really was. And I still have bad days. I've had bad days since, but I don't know. I think I try and like break it down and break it into manageable pieces, because looking like at the future, I kind of thought, like, I can't live like this for the rest of my life. And you kind of think, you know, I'm only 29, the rest of my life could be, I could live till I'm 100, and that feels so long when you're struggling with something. So I've just tried to like look at it day by day and say, okay, how am I going to get through tomorrow? And then I get through tomorrow, and then I think, right, okay, how am I going to get through the next day? And just do it a day at a time. And gradually you kind of realise that actually you're maybe not having to think about that so much, and you're just getting through the day without thinking like, how am I going to get through this day? So I think that's kind of my advice. Obviously, different things work for different people, so I don't want you to think if this way doesn't work for you, then that's it. Because there are other ways of dealing with stress that you can try. I'll try and find like a few links that I can pop down in the down bar for like dealing with stress, just so that you've got some different things to try. But I really hope that hearing like my story about stress and mental health has helped, and also hearing some of my like coping mechanisms has been helpful. I'd really be interested to hear about your experiences of stress and mental health, or just mental health in general. Can you kind of identify with anything that I've said? Can you give any other tips or advice? So if you have enjoyed this and you would like to see more, I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also press the little bell next to the subscribe button, because that will give you notifications when I upload. And also if you've got any like video requests, they can be mental health related, physical health related, or, you know, something completely different. You know, fashion, beauty, lifestyle, whatever you fancy. Please do tell me. Drop me a comment or send me a message on like Instagram or something, because I really like to hear all your ideas for videos, and I like make a little list and trying to get through them. So yeah, I hope you're all really well, and I hope this Mental Health Awareness Week that you're doing okay with your mental health. And if you're not, like, drop me a message and have a chat, because I'd be happy to chat to you. Or, you know, go to your GP and ask for some help, because there's always help out there. And I'll put the Samaritan's number in the down bar as well if you need to talk to someone 24/7 for free. So take care, and I will see you all again in another video very soon. Bye!